It's right here.
Okay.
So that was a pretty powerful moment. I remember being there. It was very emotionally charged. It looked like you got a little bit emotional in the video too. What was going through your mind in that moment? Why was this so important to you?
Well, first, thanks so much for having me here. I really appreciate the chance to chat about a few things going on in the office. Well, I mean, it was a big moment, right? We were the first state to challenge the president once his administration got started. A lot was riding on that decision by the judge for the many thousands of people trying to travel to our country or abroad. And anytime you're suing the president, you know, there's a lot at stake. And, you know, it was, I think we just all felt that, right? And I do believe, and I tell my team this all the time, the law is a powerful thing. You know, behind every case we file, people's lives are being impacted in often deeply personal ways. And so I think we all felt that after the judge announced his decision just a few minutes before that press conference.
President Trump is an unusual and unpredictable adversary.
Yeah.
What did you learn about him throughout that process that maybe the general public doesn't know?
Well, I'm not sure, you know, I have any great insights. What I can say is what our approach has been with the president, and that is that, you know, I was surprised when he was elected president. I didn't, you know, I confess
I don't think you were the only one who felt
right?
that way.
I didn't see that coming, and so I made myself a promise after he got elected that I decided I would not underestimate him again. That if he said he was going to do things during his campaign once he became president, that I would prepare for those. I would assume he would try and execute on exactly what he talked about during the campaign. And so one thing he talked about during the campaign was calling for a complete and total shutdown of Muslims coming into the United States. Those are his words. And so our team began working essentially after he was elected to prepare for a Trump administration. And so I think that's one thing I learned was, you know, not to underestimate him. Even though I may not understand why his approach works from a political standpoint, he got elected president after all, that I decided we would prepare for him legally if he did things that we thought were unconstitutional. So I think the key thing is be prepared for the unexpected, but to take him at his word. If he says he's going to roll back protections for dreamers, assume he's going to do that and prepare for it.
So what did that preparation look like in terms of the travel ban? Did you have Amazon and Expedia on speed dial, just ready to go?
Yeah, so it's interesting. So we, of course, there was no executive order after he was elected, right? So we didn't know exactly what it looked like, but we were having conversations about a potential executive order and being ready for it. Once it was rolled out on a Friday evening, my team knew to go to work on it right away. And so everybody was in the office that weekend working hard. We wanted to file it on Monday, file our complaint on Monday. And you know, one thing we talk about a lot internally in my office is that, you know, as a lawyer, it's important in every case to be telling a story, right? Yes, you're using the law, you're citing the Constitution, you're citing statutes, but tell a story. And in talking about the case, one story we wanted to tell was the adverse impacts to Washington businesses. And so that weekend, it was Sunday morning, I think, when we decided, hey, let's reach out to the business community, see if they would file declarations in support of our lawsuit, talking about the adverse impacts of the travel ban on their businesses, the tech community in particular. And so literally Sunday morning, I remember my first call was to David Zapolsky, corporate counsel for Amazon. I've known David, worked with him over my time as Attorney General, and called him up at home and said, hey, David, we're thinking of filing a lawsuit against the president on the travel ban, and would you consider filing a declaration on behalf of Amazon? And he said, well, sure, when are you thinking of filing? And I'm sure he thought this is 2 or 3 weeks away. And I said, well, we're filing tomorrow. And there was a long pause on the phone, and David said, well, hey, let me see what I can do. And Amazon and Expedia were the two companies that within 24 hours had declarations as part of our complaint, and then more than 100 tech companies came on board in the coming weeks after that as the case went forward. So to me, that was significant and important for telling our story of the impact, not just on the individuals, which of course is very important, but the broader community as well.
So this has, as you mentioned, really become a flagship issue for the tech community, immigration.
Yes.
What do you think is going to happen to innovation and to the economy if the Trump administration's immigration agenda is fully implemented? Everything from DACA to the travel ban to increased border security. Looking ahead, if all of that goes through, what's going to happen?
Well, first, not all of it will go through. That first travel ban, we defeated in court, right? And the first travel ban, keep in mind, was unbelievably broad. It applied to everybody with a green card in this country. That's 500,000 people. They could not travel back into the United States, even though they had a green card, for God's sakes, right? So we were able to stop that. A more narrow version of the travel ban has been allowed to go forward with some limitations around it. I don't think they'll be successful with the Dreamers in rolling back protections for Dreamers. But if theoretically this all goes forward, the impact for the tech industry is significant. And the declarations that have been filed on our behalf for our case on behalf of Dreamers and with the travel ban, over and over and over again, what we see in those declarations from tech companies is the adverse impacts on their recruitment and on their retention for organizations that are worldwide and global in their reach and scope. And so having the president's immigration vision being realized would, I think, have an adverse impact. One more thing I'll also emphasize is, in some ways, just as bad is the uncertainty around all these issues, right? Where you never know what's going to come out next. Tweets get put out there, sometimes very abruptly, and that, I think, creates uncertainty within the business community generally and the tech industry specifically.
And abroad, too. If I'm an entrepreneur for another country, I mean, what's going to make me come to the US versus Canada? Do you think that this is going to encourage other countries' entrepreneurial activity to spike and ours to decline?
No, I think that's exactly right. In fact, I'm glad you sort of mentioned the international community, because this morning I literally had an interview with a Dutch TV station, came out to Seattle and sat down with me to talk about the work we're doing against the Trump administration. Countries all around the world, they care deeply about what's going on with these issues, right? So it is certainly international in scope. My office has received thousands of letters from people all around the world. The community as a whole around our world, I think, is deeply concerned by what's going on.
Yeah. So you secured the first temporary restraining order on the first travel ban. That's the video that we saw from the courthouse steps. It's gotten kind of confusing.
Yeah.
We're now on travel ban 3.0. Yeah. I cover this stuff and it's confusing for me. Yeah. So maybe you could briefly update us on where we are now. Is the Supreme Court going to hear travel ban 3? Is it indefinite?
Sure. So in a nutshell, keeping it relatively simple, the first travel ban is one that we filed right away on that first travel ban. We won in the district trial court and we won at the Court of Appeals. And at that point, the administration did not appeal that to the US Supreme Court. So we won. In fact, we won to such an extent that I insisted that the federal government pay our costs for having to respond to their appeal to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals.
Were they going to?
They did, and I won't confirm or deny whether that check is framed in my office, right? But we wanted, but that was, but it was important, right? The president talked about winning all the time, so much winning. They got their butts kicked. They did. They lost. And Judge Robart, who I mentioned, that's a judge who was appointed by President George W. Bush, right? Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, 3 judges, 2 judges appointed by Democratic presidents, 1 by a Republican. All 4 of those judges agree with our arguments and shut down that travel ban. So they shut that down. They took 5 weeks and did a revised travel ban, much more narrow in scope, okay? I won't go into the details, but much more narrow in scope. We challenged that, but now other states were getting involved, right? And so we were in court before Judge Robart again on the second travel ban, but literally while we were in court, another federal judge in Hawaii granted an injunction for the state of Hawaii. So that's why on the second travel ban, we have somewhat ironically not been involved in that as it's worked its way through the courts. That's been Hawaii. Each of those travel bans, and this is the one important point I would leave with on these 3 travel bans, is that the first 2 were limited in duration to 90 days and 120 days for the key portions of it. The third travel ban, those 2 have now expired. The first one was defeated, the second one expired. The third one is unlimited in duration. So there is no ending point. It doesn't say 90 days it's over, or 120 days it's over. It's indefinite. So it goes essentially as long as Donald Trump is president and wants it to continue. So there's a lot at stake, we haven't. My office has taken a look at it, so I don't have anything to announce today on that.
Taking a look at it.
Stay tuned.
Are we going to sue again?
Stay tuned on that one. Yeah.
Okay. So it sounds like you have some fans in the audience, but you now have 19 lawsuits against the federal government. 16 as of yesterday, I think, are directly against the Trump administration. Correct me if I'm wrong. It's a lot to keep up with.
We have 19 since Donald Trump became president. We've filed 19 lawsuits against the administration.
So what do you say to people who just think you have an axe to grind against this guy?
Well, I plead guilty. I do. I don't know what to say. But I mean, more seriously, a couple points. 4 of those cases have gone through the court system. They've been determined. It's not like I'm keeping score, but we're 4-0. We've won all 4 of them, okay? We've won all 4. And so I am thoughtful about the cases we bring, right? And my criteria is pretty simple. The questions I ask my team, we have a weekly meeting, we'll have another one in a few hours, where we talk about all things with this administration. Are Washingtonians being harmed? Do we have good legal arguments? And can I, as Attorney General, bring the lawsuit? If the answer to those questions are yes, yes, and yes, well, I'm interested, right? And I don't anticipate we'll win all of them moving forward, but a lot's at stake with these cases. And just one thing I'll add to that, for the first travel ban case, obviously there's a lot at stake for the individuals from those 7 Muslim majority countries, right? A lot's at stake. But in that litigation, so much else was going on. Literally in their briefs, the federal government, the Department of Justice, your Department of Justice, in their brief, what they wrote was not just that the president has broad authority to issue an executive order, which he does. He has broad authority. What they argued in their brief was that that authority is unreviewable by the federal courts. In their brief, that's no slip of the tongue, an oral argument. In their brief, they said, court, you can't even look at this. That's breathtaking, right? Are we not a democracy? Do we not have a judiciary, separate branches of government? My view was, look, that's never been the law. It's not the law now. I will not allow that to be the law. I'm just not going to let that happen. And as a result, after they got defeated in the first travel ban, they walked that argument back. But that's an example, right? What are the limits of presidential authority? There's a reason why that first court case is taught in law schools, because it gets to the heart of what are the limits, if any, to a president when it comes to these really important issues.
So you talked about keeping score, or not keeping score,
Right.
I should say. I think it's pretty common knowledge at this point that you're a chess master, and there are tons of analogies out there about how your mind for strategy on the chessboard translates to politics. But we have the inside scoop on another game where you're also apparently a pretty formidable opponent. John Cook, our GeekWire co-founder, used to play soccer with you.
Yes.
And he said, I think his exact words were, you were like a bull out there. He said that you used to wear these racquetball-style glasses.
It's true.
And it wasn't necessarily about being the best player, but that you were just so focused and determined that nobody really wanted to go up against you. So I'm sensing kind of a theme here. Does that inform everything that you do? How does it translate to your work in the law?
Well, we are the way we are for whatever number of complex reasons, right? I'm one of 7 kids, 6 boys, 1 long-suffering sister. It was a family where we played a lot of sports and a lot of driveway basketball, and I'm on the younger side. I'm 6 of 7, and I knew if I wanted to play with my brothers, I had to compete. They weren't coddling me as a younger brother. Take my word for it, right? Whining got me nowhere, and their philosophy playing driveway basketball was no blood, no foul. In other words, if you're not bleeding, do not call a foul. We're throwing elbows around here, and so, for whatever reason, I am. My friends would tell you I'm a very, very competitive guy. I cannot stand losing. It's perhaps. I don't know. I guess if I was to characterize myself, that may be the quality that is, I may have too much of it in a way, but I just can't stand losing in anything that I do. I really can't stand it. And
I no longer believe you when you said you weren't keeping score about the Trump administration.
So my theory is if you're going to do something, you do it to the best of your ability, full stop. That's how you do it. And the more that's at stake, the more I feel that way. And so, I was proud of my team that on Friday night that first executive order was signed. That weekend, I said, hey, can we file this thing Monday? Take my word for it, to put together a legal complaint of that complexity and the declarations by Monday, is an unreasonable ask, but we got it done and shut that thing down within a week. And I think it's important to be competitive. Lots at stake, but I guess I plead guilty to that as well. Yeah, I'm a competitive guy.
I want to talk a little bit about privacy.
Yeah.
These big tech companies like Facebook, Amazon, Google have so much information about us. Mm-hmm. And I think consumers are starting to get anxious about it. We actually did an event survey before the summit asking attendees what they wanted to know the most about, and privacy kept coming up. So I'm curious, as governments start to look more closely at these companies, should there be more safeguards to protect us from how powerful they are?
Well, I guess a couple thoughts. So first, I think you're right in general. We hear that back from the public about deep concerns about personal information, right? And the year before last, I proposed a bill to our state legislature that toughened up our laws around data breaches, for example. So up until 2 years ago, if there was a data breach for a company, there was no deadline by which the company must notify consumers that their personal information has been compromised. There's no deadline. Many other states have a deadline. We didn't have that wasn't the case here. No requirement to notify the Attorney General's office of such a thing. In fact, that law had not been updated for almost a decade. Technology has changed quite a bit in how to protect a company from data breaches. So we propose a law to strengthen all those things. We now issue an annual report based on the information we get of data breaches. And the numbers, we're about to issue our report here, I think in the next 24 hours, but the jump from last year, it's almost doubled in terms of number of data breaches, more than doubled in terms of number of consumers affected here in Washington State. So it's a big concern. Our office is involved on cases, as you might imagine, working with other AGs. And so I think it's a challenging time from that perspective, yeah.
Kind of puts you in a tricky position, though, because on the one hand, you're partnering with these big tech companies like you did in the travel ban, but on the other hand, a big part of your job is protecting consumers, and those seem like they might be sometimes competing interests. How do you balance being a partner with the tech industry, but also a watchdog?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question because that's exactly right? We enforce our State Consumer Protection Act. It's very simple. If you engage in unfair or deceptive business practice, for example, we enforce that law. We have a big consumer protection division that does that. So here's the way I look at it is I believe in being upfront about what I'm doing. I believe in developing partnerships. I think the reason why Amazon and Expedia were willing to join us so quickly was I knew those folks for a long time, leading up to the travel ban. So if there's a problem, I'm gonna let them know if we see something going on. And we're all adults, and my view is to be straightforward and transparent about where I'm going and why I'm doing it, and to give folks a chance to respond to it. So yes, we wear multiple hats, but that's just part of the job, and I think people understand that.
Give us a preview of your 2020 gubernatorial campaign. What are going to be some of the key issues?
Yeah, no.
They want to know.
Right. So folks should know I'm happily married. My wife is a very, speaking privacy, she's a very private woman. No Facebook page. She's as private as someone can be. And so, I have a job. I'm deeply committed to my kids. And I'm home with them this morning, getting them out the door to school. I'll be home with them tonight to read Harry Potter to them. And I have a job where I can do those things and balance my life. So, I'll make my decisions when the time comes, but we have a governor I respect and admire, Jay Inslee. I love the work that I'm doing. And I will say this, that my view is that, and I said this when I was running for Attorney General in 2012, that the most consequential office in politics is Attorney General. And people always gave me a funny look back in 2012. Like, what are you talking about? I don't know what the AG does. No one gives me a funny look anymore when I say that. They don't, right? People understand how consequential that office is. And so I like being a lawyer. I like leading the largest, best law firm in the state. And so that's really what I'm focused on right now.
But you have held a pretty important executive office in the past. I recently learned that you were student body president at the University of Washington. So yes. The White House is the next logical step, right?
It's a logical next, yeah, right. It's a logical next step. Yeah, I was. My mom and dad are both graduates of the UW. So when my father was alive, he was very proud I was student body president there. Yeah, we're big dog fans. Yeah.
Well, I do want to talk more seriously about your history because you were part of the Jesuit Volunteer Corps. Your uncle was a Catholic priest. You could have ended up on a very different career trajectory. So how did your path become the law?
Well, I mean, there's no easy answer to that. I guess what I would say is that when I was in the Jesuit Volunteer Corps, think Peace Corps, but just through the Jesuits. They have a volunteer organization. So I spent a year with an inner city community directing an emergency services office. And in doing that work, I felt I was helping people in that community. Food, shelter, clothing, utility bills, but it did feel like I was helping provide a Band-Aid to the problems. Important, but it was a Band-Aid to get them through another day or another week. There was a legal clinic in my neighborhood where I was working, and while I didn't get to know those lawyers well, I just had the feeling in the sense that those lawyers were addressing social justice issues, socioeconomic imbalances in a more fundamental way than I could in the work that I was doing, and I thought that helped prompt me to go to law school. And in terms of the work that I do, look, I'm just not someone who's interested in money at all. It drives my wife a little crazy at times, to be honest, but I just don't have, material things have no interest to me. I used to drive a 1993 Honda Civic. That was my car until about a year and a half ago when a teenager ran a red light and totaled it, which your car is old when the person who totals your car is actually younger than the car itself. That's a sign, right? So
that's another thing you have in common with John. He has a crazy old Honda.
When I called my wife, she hated that car. When I called her up, we've got kids. The kids couldn't be in the car. When I called her up from the accident scene, she asked how I was. I said, fine. She said, how's the car? I said, well, I think it's totaled. There was a pause, and she said, are you sure? And I said, yeah, it's gone. So, but I'm just that way. So for me, what interests me in life is my family and using the law to help people in my state. Those are really the things I'm focused on. So I'm just focused on that.
So I have one more question for you, and then we're going to open it up to audience questions. So be thinking about questions that you might have, and if you do have a question, just raise your hand, and we'll have a mic runner come over to you. But before we do that, I want to talk a little bit about elections. Big tech companies like Google, Facebook, Twitter, they're in the news right now for the role that they played in enabling Russians to meddle with the 2016 election. They were able to buy hundreds of thousands of ads, political ads, and then also spread fabricated news stories. What kinds of protections do you think should be in place to govern the spread of political information on social media, especially if it comes from a foreign power?
Yeah, I'm not sure I'm the expert on that, right, to be perfectly honest. I've got my hands full with some things that are going on at the national level right now. I mean, that's it. I'm deeply concerned about what I see, as everybody is, right? And the power of the ability of foreign governments to potentially influence elections, right? So I don't pretend like I've got the answers on that, right? I'm looking to our members of Congress at the federal level as they enact laws and protections for that. I think it's a challenge for the industry, right? That cannot be easy. I can only imagine what that's like trying to oversee that type of information. But I don't pretend to be the expert on having the solution on how to address that.
Does anybody in the audience have a question? Nobody? I don't see any hands out there. Oh, over here maybe?
Hi, A.G. Ferguson, great talk. Back to Trump for a second. You know, you're obviously part of the administration and the state administration. What are the most important things the rest of us can do, both through the political process and outside of the political process, with regard to the depredations of the Trump administration?
That's interesting. I guess this is what I would say is that, look, this is just my personal view. I think this is a dark time for our country. I believe that. But wherever one stands on the political spectrum, it is undoubtedly a pivotal time for our country. There's a lot going on, right, to your questions. And so what I often say to people is it's just not a time to be on the sidelines. And everybody has a different role they can fill. As Attorney General, I have a specific set of tools I can use, and I thank God every day I have the job that I have. I really do. But everybody has a role, right? Protest, write letters, speak to your members of Congress, right? Engage in some way, volunteer, wherever you land on these issues. And I think that's the most important thing. And I do think, as an example of, there is a power behind grassroots activism. You know, that first travel ban when it came out, as you all know, people were at SeaTac Airport, airports all around the country protesting. Without any doubt, that helped raise the profile of that issue and give it a sense of urgency and helped educate people. That travel ban was popular when it was first enacted by the president. Much less so now, right? Due in no small part because people got engaged, right? Yes, lawyers filed lawsuits to stop it, but there was activism on many, many levels from people all across our country that made a big difference. So that's my view, is people just need to be engaged in whatever way works for them. It's different for everybody, but it's no time to be on the sidelines.
Shifting back to privacy.
Yeah.
I think last week we heard FDIC and Yahoo both had headlines on breaches. Mm-hmm. So when are we going to see either a designated jailee or meaningful fines, and by meaningful, I mean in the mega millions, to push companies to protect our data, or else can we just follow the EU?
Look, do I think in general that the potential fines that can be levied when there are really egregious breaches of personal information are too low? Yes. I'll give you an example. In Washington State, I wish I had the exact numbers on my fingertips, but so for corporate crimes in Washington State, the penalty for that has not been updated in, I hope I'm not exaggerating, but I think it's literally like 40 years. I mean, I'm really not exaggerating, right? That there was a bill proposed by Mike Pleciotti, a legislator down in the 30th District and Federal Way, proposing to just bring it up with cost of inflation since that time. Didn't go anywhere in the legislature. And that's just in Washington State. Then you got, to your point, on the national side as well. So I don't have an easy answer for you, but anytime in Washington State we propose something like that, you're going to have a lot of opposition to it. And politicians are often hesitant to take on powerful interests when they're not playing by the rules. That's just my view on it. So no easy answer on that. I'd write to your members of Congress and encourage them on your views on that. Yeah, I enforce the laws that are on the books, right? And that's my job.
We have time for maybe one more if anybody else has questions. Over here. Oh, right here.
Hi.
Hi.
Did I hear you say correctly that you thought DACA protections would not be rolled back? And if so, can you expound on that?
Sure. So as you know, when the president made his announcement rolling back protections for DACA, he gave a deadline of March, basically. And if Congress didn't act, he would then roll back those protections. I can't say I'm wildly optimistic that Congress will act. So we filed a lawsuit the next business day challenging the president's authority to roll back those protections. So we have a hearing in January. We've joined up with other states as well on that. And so, I'm optimistic about our lawsuit. One thing to keep in mind on that, it's a complicated case, all these cases are, but when Attorney General Sessions went forward before the country to announce rolling back protections for DACA, and the president announced it, the basis for their decision, really the basis for the decision, what they said was, well, DACA itself is illegal. DACA is illegal, therefore Congress, you need to act. Congress has to act or we're gonna let it run its course. There's just one problem with saying DACA is illegal. No courts ever reached that conclusion. And I mean like not one. Us lawyers care about these details, right? And so, so first, if anyone ever tells you DACA is illegal, just ask them to tell you what court held that. No court has. Number two, the Department of Justice, which of course the Attorney General leads, up until that announcement, has been defending DACA as constitutional and as lawful. That's been the position of the federal government since DACA was implemented. What changed? New president, new Attorney General. But nothing else changed, right? And these points matter in a court of law. Now, are any of these cases easy? Of course not. These are complicated cases, but I think I'm optimistic with our lawsuit, or I would not have filed it. And then more globally, look, I mean, DACA is sort of within the contentious area of immigration where there are strong views on both sides. DACA is wildly popular. I've seen polls of upwards of 80% of Americans support it for good reason, right? These are individuals who came to our country as children through no fault of their own. Why on earth would we deport them to a country they don't know? It makes no sense. So I'm hopeful on the political side, but I'm focused on the legal side and would not have filed a lawsuit unless I thought we could stop what the president was doing.
Well, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. Really appreciate it.